even taking down and removing the leader of Syria, and his staff basically said, yeah, we're not going to do that. There's this idea that President Trump, if he does something that they don't agree with, and there's enough people that they can find a way to thwart whatever the president's trying to do, that could be a big deal. If he says, I want to send missiles to Syria, and they say, well, we can't logistically do this, and they make up some sort of excuse, or if they're taking papers off of the president's desk, as is what Bob Woodward wrote. He said that Gary Cohn physically took things off the president's desk so he wouldn't sign them. Even if they agree with some of his policies, they could be actually saying, we don't want this decision to be made, so we're going to wait for him to forget about it.
And that would be something that I think would be of concern in any administration, when you start stealing papers off the president's desk to stop a decision or interfering. And I think that's what President Obama was referring to, that we did not vote for these people. We did not elect them. They're not accountable. But when you have someone that everyone seems to, at least off the record, agree is out of control, this is the kind of environment you set where people think they're doing the right thing to protect the country and protect people from somebody that was reckless. But your point is, he didn't just turn reckless, he was reckless running around during the whole campaign. Oh, I'm sorry, even before that, looking for a birth certificate in Kenya that was never there. So, I mean, I don't understand how we balance this out now, even with an anonymous writing. Thank you, Yamiche. For more on this, I want to bring in Republican strategist Jen Kern. Jen, the president is being profiled by this anonymous New York Times piece and by the Woodward book as being out of control, being a walking time bomb that could at any point do something that would cause real damage. And yet, for him to be managed by people around him to protect him from us from him, who are not elected, who are not accountable. Listen to former President Obama on Friday. Listen to this.
The politics of division and resentment and paranoia has unfortunately found a home in the Republican Party. They're undermining our alliances, closing up to Russia. What happened to the Republican Party? It did not start with Donald Trump. He is a symptom, not the cause.
So when you have former President Obama saying he's a symptom, is it that the voters and the public and your party overlooked all of the behavioral patterns of this president because they wanted to build on this resentment and they wanted to build on this backlash to the policies that they disagreed with, from the Affordable Care Act to criminal justice reform? And they'd say, fine, we know he's eccentric, he's out of control, but we'll get our judges on the federal bench and even the Supreme Court, and we'll reverse health care. Did we see them so anxious, people that you may agree with, that they overlooked what now has become a potential problem for them, and that is the behavior of this president?
Well, good morning, Rev. Look, there's no doubt about it that Republicans and, by the way, independents chose to elect President Trump based upon their disagreement with these 8 years of Barack Obama. But look, as President Barack Obama said yesterday, what has happened to the parties? What has happened to civility in politics? I have to ask the same question. I think the attacks that are being laid against President Trump right now are very, very dangerous. This calling him unfit to be president. And you look at Barack Obama's comments yesterday. He said, that Republicans are cozying up to Russia. Look at the attacks on President Trump right now. Those are Soviet-era tactics. This is exactly what the Soviet Union used to do to folks. They used to say, you know what, because I don't agree with you, I'm going to say that you must be crazy. You must be unfit to be president. You must be unfit.
Yeah, but these charges, Jen, are not coming from the Democrats or the opposition. They're coming from his own staff, writing anonymous letters to the New York Times or anonymous op-ed pieces. They're talking to Woodward. I mean, we've never seen a presidency where someone in his senior staff writes an op-ed on the New York Times. So you can't blame that on the opposition. And by the way, for a fact check, when you say that the country and independents voted against Obama, President Trump got almost 3 million less votes than Hillary Clinton. So let's not get into the same distortion of facts like we did the size of the crowd at the inauguration. The fact is he lost the popular vote. So let's not act like most Americans disagreed with where the direction was going. It's just that the electoral map put Mr. Trump in the White House.
Well, look, regarding the anonymous op-ed, we don't know yet who wrote that. And I suspect at the end of the day, it will be either an Obama holdover, that's someone who was an Obama appointee who President Trump allowed to stay in the White House, and is probably a Democrat, or it might be a Republican who just so happens not to agree with President Trump. And there are many. I have many friends who are never Trumpers. But look, President Trump made it very clear from the beginning that he was going to the swamp to blow up the boxes and to change how business as usual happened in Washington, D.C. And people don't like it. Even Republicans don't like it. I have friends in many places in the Republican Party that still talk about him behind his back. And so it doesn't mean that the charges are any more legitimate just because they come from a Republican. There are many Republicans who liked the status quo in Washington, D.C. They don't like that he's come along to upset the apple cart. But again, I go back to, I think we're in very dangerous territory here when you start to charge people with being unfit to be president. We saw this in apartheid South Africa. We saw this with Nelson Mandela. They said, oh, you must be crazy. You've got to be jailed for a while to keep a lid on you. We saw this in the USSR back in the days.
Wait a minute. Just a second, Jen. I've got to stop you there. How do you compare people talking about this president getting up, talking about shooting heads of state and this president being out of control, with Nelson Mandela refusing to submit further to being treated less than a citizen in his own nation based on the color of his skin? They didn't put Nelson Mandela in jail because he was eating Big Macs in the middle of the night, tweeting words that didn't exist. Now let's at least keep this within the boundaries of making sense.
No, look, I wrote about this at The Hill last January, so more than 6 months ago. Look, these tactics have been used. They were used in apartheid South Africa. They were used in communist China to jail people who were political dissenters.
Against the ideology. We're not talking about people that disagree with his ideology. Those were the tactics. They would say they were terrorists, they were communists. That's not what they're saying about Trump. They're saying he's incompetent. They're saying that he has diminished mental faculties. And these are his people. These are Omarosa. These are Michael Cohen. These are people that worked for him. These are not people that are opponents. And they all have the same line. When everybody's describing you the same way, how is that some kind of tactic that was used in Russia or South Africa?
Because, again, this is being driven mostly by Democrats and those within the party who are not Tea Partiers that put Trump in office. They're not people who like the status quo in the swamp being upset. And again, it goes back to look at the people that were imprisoned, look at the people who were called mentally unfit, and that is the exact campaign that's going on. Look on Twitter this morning. There's a hashtag unfit to be president, unfit to serve. It's a tactic of the Soviet era that Democrats and some Republicans go to all the time when you can't get a person on anything else. And Reverend, they've not been able to say.
But these are not Democrats. These
and
are
it doesn't matter. Look,
these are Trump staff members. This is his personal lawyers. Lawyer, you're talking about the swamp. I mean, have you noticed the indictments and the guilty pleas that come out of Trump land? I don't think y'all ought to be mentioning swamp too often. But thank you anyway, Jen, for being with me this morning.
Well, look, it crosses party lines, these type of attacks. Trump was not their guy. Trump wasn't even the Republican Party's initial choice. There were a lot of people in the RNC and elsewhere rooting against him because they knew he would do exactly what he's doing, which is going his own line, going his own way. That's why the American people elected him.
The American people did vote on the Electoral College for the men, but the questions about whether he is their guy is coming from the people that told us they were their guy, and they're saying our guy has a problem.
I'll bet
But
you.
thanks
I'll
again
bet you a
for being
steak
here.
dinner.
Coming
Rev,
up,
it'll
I
be an
gotta keep
Obama
going.
holdover. Yep.
Well, if it is an Obama holdover, I don't think Michael Cohen and Omarosa and others were. May have heard 39 hours of confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, but now we realize we didn't get many answers. That's next. Be right back.